Welcome back into HQ Spotlight. It is college football playoff week, and we're talking about the game that nobody expects to be close, James Madison at Oregon. It's the largest spread in a CFP game all time. The Ducks are 21.5-point favorites. But before you go clutching your pearls about G5 teams, remember last year's first-round games were won by an average margin of a little over 19 points. Obviously a big spread between the other G5 team as well, with Ole Miss and Tulane. Let's welcome in Brad Crawford and Tom Fornelli. That said, guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being it's going to happen, Tom, what chance do you give JMU of upsetting the Ducks?
Oh, it's a small chance. I would say it's somewhere in that 2 to 3 on a scale of 1 to 10 range. I just think that, I do think, honestly, my feeling is if you look at the two games involving G5 teams in this very first round, I know this one has the largest spread, and I know it is the largest spread in college football playoff history, but I actually believe James Madison has a better chance of keeping it close with Oregon than Tulane does with Ole Miss, because if you look at this James Madison team, they have an excellent defense. They have not played a schedule that is nearly on par with the teams Oregon faces on a weekly basis. But if you look at their defensive numbers of the teams playing this weekend, they are number one in a lot of stats ahead of Oklahoma. So I do think defensively they are good, and I think that they've been very solid running the ball all season long, which is what their entire offense is built on. And we have seen at times this Oregon defense has had difficulty slowing down rushing attacks. If we go back to Oregon's very latest game against Washington a couple weeks ago, their rush defense in that was putrid. They had a very difficult time slowing down the Huskies. They had difficulty slowing down Northwestern this year, Wisconsin, Penn State, a lot of teams. So if James Madison is able to find some success on the ground and kind of slow this one down a little bit, I think they could do a decent job of keeping this thing interesting into the second half, where maybe some eyebrows start to raise and wonder, are we going to see this happen?
Yeah, I mean, for David to beat Goliath in this matchup, you have to control the controllables. And I know that's a coach speak phrase that a lot of these underdogs are going to be using this weekend. But if JMU gets in a situation where they turn it over in the first quarter, leading to immediate points for Oregon, that's when you start seeing the snowball effect as far as deficits are concerned. I give JMU a little bit better hopes in here, maybe a 4 or 5 scale. Tom alluded to it. The Dukes have to get Wayne Knight involved. 1,300 yards rushing this season, had 200+ against Troy last time out, and he had one of those explosive touchdown runs. Now, he gets one of those early at Autzen Stadium and takes that sellout crowd out of it. Then you start talking about Oregon is the team playing with pressure, JMU with house money as the 12 seed. So while I'm expecting a sizable Oregon win as well, I think there is a scenario in which JMU keeps this one competitive and puts some pressure on this 5 seed.
Yeah, David's got a pretty good run game, Tom. That's why Wayne Knight is your impact player to watch. You heard Brad mention him there. What's your take on what he's capable of in this matchup?
Yeah, not to be confused with the guy who played Newman on Seinfeld. This is a very different Wayne Knight, but he is a very useful player for them, and he is obviously, he's their leading rusher. He rushed for 1,263 yards, but they use him in a lot of different ways. It's like you see it with a lot of G5 teams. When you have a special talent, you find ways to put the ball in his hands as often as you can, and that's exactly what the Dukes do. He's also got 380 yards through the passing game, and he's also been used on punt and kick returns. So he's a guy who does a little bit of everything and has been the focal point of this team. So him combined with Alonzo Barnett in the backfield at quarterback and running back, that combination, it's been very difficult for the teams they have faced to stop. They find ways to get those big runs. As Brad mentioned, there are a lot of explosive runs in this offense, and that is what they live off of. If they can find a way to get those against this Oregon defense, which they have a propensity to give up at times, like we were talking about, this is a team that I think can hang around quite a bit and make this one interesting.
Yeah, we've talked about JMU being defensive-minded, one of the top total defenses in college football, not just a G5. So I'm going with defensive lineman, first-year player, by the way, Sahir West. Leads JMU in sacks, leads JMU in havoc numbers, I like to call them, tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He's a guy this season that Bob Chesney, the head coach there at JMU, has called on when the Dukes need a big play defensively, and he seems to always come through. Off that edge, I think he could give Oregon some issues if he's able to get past that initial wave up front of the Ducks. I know Oregon is solid at right and left tackle, but they've had some injuries up there. Sahir West obviously is going to be an unblockable force for the Duke. So if JMU intends on keeping this one close and maybe trying to win the turnover margin battle, there in Eugene, I think Zahir West is a guy who has to not only get after Dante Moore, but also get Oregon's offense off the field on third down.
Sunbelt Freshman of the Year for Zahir West. And I guess if Wayne Knight is Newman, that makes Oregon Jerry Seinfeld in this. I'm getting really way too in deep with this. I didn't even think about that when you mentioned it, Tom, but now the head is spinning. Let's continue to talk about Oregon, though, because, of course, a big question mark is how healthy they are able to get with all of this extended time off. They didn't play in the Big Ten championship game, giving them another week. So what do we expect, especially from that wide receiver room when it comes to health?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things with Oregon that's flown under the radar, at least nationally, as far as the job that Dan Lanning and his assistants did this year. Like finishing the last month of the year, they were playing a lot of the tougher games on their schedule, and they were doing so with a lot of key players missing. Obviously, they lost Evan Stewart, one of their stud receivers, before the season began for the year, but we didn't see DeCorian Moore over these last few weeks. There were games where they were missing starting right tackle Alex Harkey. We saw Gary Bryant go down with an injury, and even Kenyon Sadiq in the Washington game got a bit banged up in that one, and we aren't entirely sure how healthy he is for this one. So I do think that this is a team that has been excellent all season long, but they haven't been at 100%. So if this is a team that shows up at the playoff and they're healthy for the first time all year, I think the ceiling on this squad is much higher than we've seen at any point during the regular season. So I do wonder how different Oregon may look once the playoff starts. But I also wonder if you're Dan Lanning and that coaching staff, maybe if guys like DeCorian Moore aren't 100% yet, maybe you just let them rest because you've proven, hey, we could beat good teams without these guys. Maybe we can get away another game without them too.
They've done it because they've had another great option to catch passes, tight end Kenyon Sadiq. That's really all they need, Brad. What makes them can't miss TV?
Yeah, a couple of touchdowns a few weeks ago against USC in one of those playoff elimination games for the Ducks. He had a touchdown catch also against Minnesota, almost 100 yards there. And then Tom said a few minutes ago he suffered that injury in the Washington game, only 4 catches for 11 yards. He's not full strength, but tied in, especially in this Will Stein offense on third down for the Ducks. That is a legitimate weapon and go-to target for Dante Moore. He's a guy that I don't think JMU has a outside linebacker who can cover him in space. So if I'm Will Stein, I am spamming targets Kenyon Sadiq's way as long as he's available and trying to get him the football as early and as often as possible.
It's not a unique problem for James Madison. I'm not sure who else has somebody that can guard Kenyon Sadiq, which is why when we just had a mock draft segment, Mike Renner has him going in the top 15, which is a lot to say for a tight end. Let's get to our game predictions. Tom, what happens in this one?
Yeah, you know, I like to think back to earlier this season, the last time Oregon hosted a team filled with James Madison players, and they lost by 10 to the Indiana Hoosiers, who were filled with James Madison defenders who gave them all sorts of trouble. I just don't think we're going to see a repeat here. I do think Oregon does end up winning this game, although I expect it will be closer. And I also think it's going to be a little bit lower scoring because of the way both of these offenses have worked to finish the season. We know James Madison is going to want to run the ball, and Oregon has really been leaning into its run game lately, too. So I think it's a lower scoring game that Oregon pulls out.
Yeah, I'm going 31-10 Oregon. Dukes squeak by as far as the spread is concerned. I just think the Ducks have too many playmakers, and JMU, they're going to have to get plays out of Alonzo Barnett at quarterback, and I just don't see it happening.
All right, there you have it. Goliath wins in this round. Fellas, we appreciate you breaking that one down for us. As always, for more breakdowns, head to the CBS Sports College Football YouTube channel. We made it very easy for you to subscribe. Just hold your phone up to the screen and scan that QR code.